am Michael T. Smith. This is the Church of, and here is your message for the week of, my gosh, can you believe it? It's the 23rd, February 23rd, 2025, number 43. Very quickly creeping up on the last week of April, I guess, going the first week of May, number 52. Going to be a great time. We start and we're talking about an overarching question that we've been digging into since the beginning of the year. What about your funeral? Reverse engineering our lives. Say, what do we want to look like inside and outside? Through what eyes do we want to see? Through what lens do we want to be viewed on the time of our transition? Backing that up to, well, if that's the end of our life, what do we want to see by the end of the year? How do we want to look? How do we want to understand and connect with the world by the end of the month or the day or the week or even by the end of this message? And we've been talking about the question on seasons. We've asked several different questions related to our funeral. We've been stuck for the past couple weeks on what about our season, the seasons of life. And we've had four thoughts. Thought A was about the time of life. Are you in the springtime, the summertime, the autumn, or the winter of life? Where are we? Thought B, on the timeline of humanity. We're the raging 20s we're in right now. They had the roaring 20s. We're in the raging 20s. And both the chaos, right, and symphony of the age in which we live, both the reality and the romance. We sometimes don't appreciate the dysfunction of the reality of our age simply because we are numb to it. It is our normal. And looking back, hopefully over time, we'll say, wow, I can't believe we used to thought that way. Like Jerry Seinfeld, can you believe there was a time when dogs couldn't vote? That kind of a thing. So there is some folly to our age. There is some ugly reality to it. There are also the ugly realities that we see, and maybe we'll talk about some of that towards the end of today's message. But there's also a romance that's not immediately evident because we're going through the motions and the strivings that we have now, but that romance is certainly here. And then we moved on to see the focus of life. What about the focus of life? Where is your energy? It's not time management, it's energy management. Where is the primary focus, the secondary focus, the secondary, tertiary focus? Where is it? And then we finally, last week, ending here, and we're going to conclude with this today. Where are you in real time, right? In the real time, online real time season of your life. The first three are generic, spring, summer, winter, fall. It's generic to all people. There is a generic reality of the age in which we live. There is a generic reality of focus. Sometimes we're focusing on education. Sometimes we're focusing on establishment. Sometimes we're focusing on relational bonds or having children or these type of things. We're before kids, after kids, empty nesters, and there's generic seasons there. But now we're talking about what is specific to you, specific to where you are in life. I want to start in the Christian scriptures today. I'll read a little excerpt attributed to the Apostle Paul, but whether he wrote it or not, or whether it was whoever wrote it, it doesn't matter. There's some beautiful stuff here for us, and maybe not, hear this through the lens of the way we've been conditioned, but hear it in the beauty of its just universal truth for us. It says, "Blessed be God, the Father of mercies." 2 Corinthians chapter 1 is where I'm reading from. Blessed be God, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort. The King James, blessed be God, and then he goes into this parenthetical, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort. I love that, the God of all comfort. God is the God of all comfort. Verse 4, God who comforts us, right, in all of our tribulation. Why? So that no matter what difficulties or what season we're going through, that we may be also able to comfort those which are in any trouble. So we are all in different seasons of different levels of prosperity or volatility, but no matter the season, the God of all comforts, who comforts us in all our tribulation, brings us a comfort that not only comforts us, but it's an overflowing comfort whereby we may comfort anyone else going through. How in the middle of my difficult season am I able to comfort someone else? We talked about Jesus on the cross, right? at the nadir, right? The lowest point, when his cup was overflowing, he was the life of the party. Everybody wanted him there. That's why he was at so many parties. He was the number one guest invite. Read all the stories. He's at this person's house and this person's feast and this person's party, and he was there, right? But at the lowest point, when you would have thought he said, "Look, I've done enough for everybody," the man looks over at him on the cross and says, "Look, I'm afraid of what's going to happen next." And Jesus is like, "Man, be at peace. I got you. It's all good." So comforting, how? How do you comfort when you're in your tribulation? Out of this superabundance of comfort from God. Comfort others, verse 4, with the same comfort that's comforting me, I'm able to pour out to comfort others, and that speaks to the largeness of our spirit. Dropping down to verse 9, the writer Paul says, "For we would not, brethren, have you ignorant of our trouble, our difficulties, which came to us in Asia." And he talks now about the external pressures and the internal results. We were pressed out of measure. We were pressed above strength. It wasn't a bootstrap situation where I just got to get through this. It was pushing us too much, in so much that we despaired even of life. The pressure was so tense that it felt like we were going to die. I don't know if you've ever been there. I don't know if you're right there right now, but that is a season. That is a reality. That is something that confronts us, where the strain, circumstantial strain, in combination with the inner strain, comes to a place where you literally feel like, I'm going to die. Think of the words of Jesus, right, in Matthew. The King James, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful," in the Garden of Gethsemane. "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death." One translation says, "The pain is so difficult, the pressure is so difficult, it feels like I'm going to die." So Paul is talking about that universal experience. And if you've not lived that dark day, if you've not had the dark hour of the soul, as it's famously quoted, it will be there one day. You will encounter that. You live long enough, and you'll get to this place where it was so bad outside and inside. I felt like I want to die. But we had this sentence of death in the King James. The other translations say we have the answer. We had a response to the death that was pushing in on us. We had a response to it, and that response was that we should not trust in ourselves, but we should trust in the living God, both in God which raised the dead, right? And this same God who, watch this, verse 10, past, present, and future. The God who has delivered us past tense from times where the life was being pushed out of us. Verse 10, present tense. And God who does presently deliver us from the circumstances that we're in. Verse 10, future tense, in whom also we trust that God will yet deliver us. So when it pressed in on us, we decided to move out of our own strength, to seat ourselves in the strength of God, the comfort of God, and to say, I seat myself trusting in God. God who has brought me out of previous seasons where my soul was so vexed, I felt like the life was going out of me. God who is delivering me, Paul says, in the present season, who is sustaining me with the comfort that comes from God only, and God who I know I'll come out of this soul-stretching season into another season of peace, and even that season of peace may not be entirely circumspect or complete. It may simply be a season of peace that lasts a long time. It may be a season of peace that lasts a short time. It may be a season of peace that's beset and its heels are nipped at by these fears and by these worries. It doesn't matter. Or if I know I'm going into another dark hour of the soul, I trust in God who has brought me out of that dark hour, who is bringing me out of the dark hour, and who shall bring me out of that dark hour should it return. This now becomes this reality of walking through the seasons of life. And so we go. We find ourselves, we talked about in real time, and I said last week that life has cycles and patterns and seasons. And we are not always aware of these cycles, patterns, and seasons, but our life is cyclical. Our life is patternical, if you will, simply because the cosmos, the universe, all the creation, the planets, the worlds, I remember when Governor Palin talked about, Russia. I know about Russia. I can see Russia from my house. And people mocked her. And if you actually see a photo of how close Alaska is to Russia, she didn't literally mean she could see it from her house. But, I mean, it's like you could stand across the bay and say, oh, my gosh, that's Russia. Oh, my gosh, that's Alaska. And I always, I wear these glasses, and sometimes it's like, I can't see very much up here, but if I move them down, oh, there it is, crystal clear. So it's probably time for a new prescription. We'll work that out. But I always tell the kids, I say, don't tell me my eyesight's going bad. I can see Mars from my house. I stand out and I look, there's Mars and there's Jupiter. I mean, my eye, even without my glasses, oh my gosh, that's the red one. I can see it. So I can see it from my house. And they're all moving, and they can tell you, oh, this one's going to be back in view at this time, and this one's going to be back in view. So our lives move in those patterns because that's the order of all created things, to move in those patterns. So we are all, because there's seasons, because there's an ebb and flow, you and I don't know what season you're in. You may be riding high, you may be in a despair season, but we are all in constant flux, right? We're all in constant flux. Our capacitors are always cycling and circling and swelling and shrinking, right? We are all in constant flux. Though, in your notes here, we are all in constant flux, though it's often seemingly imperceptible that the lighting has changed, the mood has changed. The guy said he was playing in the beginning, and then the mood all changed, right? The seemingly imperceptible flux, sometimes it's slow and pulsing, you don't realize. Occasionally the flux is pulsating, and it creates a tremble, but we're all kind of in this constant, almost lava lamp state, right? I want you to think of just, there's a bubbling up and a falling down, and then there's a color shift and a bubbling up. We all live in this. It's part and parcel of the human dynamic. And when Paul talks about God brought me out of that past crisis of soul and life, that was a season. Why is it a past one? Because it ended, and then there was another period, and now I'm in a present one. Why is it a present one? Because it wasn't there yesterday, and it's probably not going to be there tomorrow. It wasn't there last year, and it may not be there next year. Or it wasn't there in my 40s, but it might, and it's not going to last through my 50s, whatever that is. So he's talking about that flux, right? That movement, and you think about the psalmist, right? You think about the famous Frank Sinatra ballad of That's Life. You're riding high in April and shot down in May. And these are, being aware of these seasons helps us say, okay, we're asking, what about my funeral? But before we get to the end of life, we're talking about where are we now? And just somehow, sometimes knowing that the crisis of soul is part of it, is helpful to go through those seasons, to deal with that flux. And so we'll talk about it now. Let's talk about these cycles, right? These repeating cycles of flux, right? We'll just call it that. Flux, maybe we can do the flux capacitor here if we want to, we got, it's this cycle. The first one is emergence, right? Emergence. That's the first part of the cycle. And we're all repeating this. And what is emergence? Well, let's take some things in our notes here. Emergence. When we're going through a season of emergence, we are more fully inhabiting our own soul. Sometimes we feel like we're more fully inhabiting our own body. Emergence, we're expanding, and we're taking up more space. And it's not necessarily taking up more space in the world, although in seasons of emergence we do tend to stand more upright and to shoulders back and to not feel like we're encountering the world through a cowering posture. But in a sense of emergence, maybe we're not standing fully as ourselves, but more fully inhabiting our own bodies, present in our own soul. I did my first one-man show back in October, and so Connie asked me, my kids were very close to me, and my dad, and just watching me through, and Connie, and just watching me go through this process. And she asked, how do you feel? And it was very interesting. I said, have you ever, you take off a jacket real quick, you're rushing, and or you take off your robe or something, and you pull a sleeve in, and the next time you go to put it on, you put one sleeve, and then you're just kind of doing that little thing, and you're trying to, and it's got to, and I say, as you push your arm in, you're expanding the sleeve. I said after doing this part of me and doing this show back in October, I felt like my true self was was occupying more of who I am, right? It's emergence. Like there's a part of me that's been stifled or cut off, and I was able to expand into my true self, occupy more of my soul. Now, doing it the second time in Jacksonville, I thought, well, is it a fluke or not? And I feel like, okay, I'm more of myself. And now we're looking at other cities. We're looking at LA. We're looking at Houston. We're looking at DC. So stay tuned for that. Somebody say, what is this process of? I realize I'm in a season of emergence, right? Of more fully occupying my own self. I'm filling in my place in the world more fully. I'm filling in my place. In your notes, emergence is you feel like, okay, I'm more seated and slotted in my jurisdiction, in my territory, which is a matter of time and place. So I'm filling in my place. But here's another thing: I'm more fully looking back at my own face in the world. That when I see me as me, I see me more me than I did in a previous season. This is emergence, where the inward and outward, right? This convergence kind of idea. The inner and the outer are aligning. It's like who I am and what I'm doing are more fully coming into that kind of alignment. This is a place of emergence. My mother used to always say to me when I was very little, Mikey, it's very important that you can look in your eyes. You have to live a life that you can look in your eyes in the mirror each morning and say, I'm a good person. You have to be able to look and know that you're not, going through life trying to hurt people or going through life trying to blah, blah, blah. And I was very little and it wasn't even in a spiritual context. It was just make sure you can look at yourself and know yourself, that to know who you are and to look back and to see and to like what we see is often an inner process, especially because that looking yourself in the eyes in the mirror in the morning and saying, okay, I can check in with myself and I know I've been operating, not with perfection, but I've been aiming for this kind of alignment. It's really about striving. It's about striving to live in the large self. And that idea of looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm a good person is most useful outside of the context of weaponized religion or traditional conditional religion. If you do this, then God will do this. If you don't do this, then you're on the bad side of God. That conditional weaponized religion is not very useful looking in your eyes. Why? Because those religious ideas, they teach us that we are never good or that we are nothing good. And they teach us that looking in our eyes and checking in with ourselves and saying in the mirror, okay, I see where I'm doing good. I see where I'm, and if you can't look yourself and say, I don't look like a good person, I'm not looking back at a good person today, then you go into your life and say, what do I have to amend so that tomorrow morning's mirror appointment, I can look at that? Because the weaponized religion, it teaches us that we are not good, that we are nothing good, and it often vilifies just the base elements of being human. When I was younger, before my religious conversion, right, before converting to conditional weaponized Christianity, looking in the mirror and knowing that I had loved and that I'd been honest and that I'd, and that's fine. But after I got into the church and after I got into my pastors in Orlando and all the doctrines and the theologies, and again, the people that taught me, they didn't invent the misrepresentation of God, right? We inherited it. I didn't invent it. I inherited it and I passed it on because we're told the more faithfully we pass it on, the better we are in the eyes of God. And we're also told that once you've seen it, if you don't do it faithfully, well, that's a double punishment, right, from God. And but it also, weaponized religion, it teaches us that we're not good, that we're nothing good, but it also vilifies the simple parts of us that are human, the little parts of us that are sometimes down or sometimes up or sometimes want or sometimes don't want. And we're told that all of those things are bad. So looking in your mirror and checking in with yourself, right, as you say, I'm emerging, I'm filling the place. Sometimes when you check in with yourself in the context of weaponized religion, you're checking in with yourself, shaming yourself for just being human and having human wants, desires, and needs. And of course, religion vilifies that. But then somehow, while vilifying weaponized religion, right? Not true religion, but weaponized religion vilifies the normal parts of being human, while somehow perversely esteeming the dignity depriving beliefs that often act as being a good person, right? So that almost if I have this self-flagellation, right? If I'm harming myself and hating myself and down on myself and in judgment constantly of everybody else who is out of alignment with God, and by out of alignment with God I mean whatever definition is a little more out of alignment with God than I am. So like my dad says, Pop always says, he says your definition of old changes as you age, right? You know, when you're 50, he said, my God, 70, that's old. He says, when you're 70, when he just turned 80 this week, when you're 80, my gosh, 95 is old. He was having a conversation with a friend, and he right before his birthday, and he said, she was 95, and he says, yeah, 80 is coming in a couple of months, and I'm starting to get apprehensive about it. And this 95-year-old woman said, oh, hey, don't you worry about that. 80's nothing. It's 90's the one that's really rough. And so the definitions of old, right? So the definitions of I'm a good person usually mean that I'm barely inside the line, and anybody that's one micro dot outside of the line, boy, they're in judgment. And so this is what this religion, this false antichrist, contra Christ religion does to us, and so we're not able to sometimes through weaponized religion fully occupy ourselves in a place of emergence, because the very things that are most natural and true to ourselves are the things that religion vilifies, while also esteeming things that are quite perverse and quite contrary to any sort of God that's the God of all comfort. And so we move now further out of this season of emergence, and the next one is this season of retreat, right? And there's a season of retreat, and I have withdrawal, right? Withdrawal, AWAL, or the cocoon season, right? You go into a cocoon season in a nursing home, right, with some space-age pods in a pool. Milton, is it Brimley? Ed Brimley or something like that. Who's the guy, the oatmeal guy? Anyway, so that you go to this, and so here's the you were in one season, and now you're in a place of flux. So where there's this kind of enlarging you, and now there's this there's a swelling you, and now there's this kind of, it's not an atrophy, it's a shrinking, it's a withdrawal, it's a retreat. So this part of flux is most painful, right, in our seasons. And it's often because it's not merely isolating to retreat, right, to withdraw into cocoon, but it's actually, it can feel like, and forgive my, because it can feel like you're being pulled back A-wards, right? You can feel like you're being sucked through a window, through a portal, like on a plane or on a spaceship. You're being pulled backwards into some sort of consecration cave, and you're being pulled through a door that our ego, right, our sense of self, our super self, is too large to go through. And so as a result, there's a breaking and a shredding of ourselves as we're pulled from this place of emergence where I'm becoming more and occupying full, and then we go into this next part of flux where there's this retreat, this withdrawal, this cocoon, and we're being taken through a hole that all of the occupying of ourselves won't necessarily fit through that entrance. I think of it, octopi, right? And they put him in these little things, and they say he'll never get out. And man, they just go all the way through. And so we say, well, I'll never. You want me to get in that cave? I can't even fit through the door. God grabs a hold of you. Life grabs a hold of you. Universe grabs and starts pulling you through. And you say, man, I didn't even realize. And so there's this breaking and this crushing. Think of the imagery of the woman with the alabaster box and bringing it to Jesus. This is factually true, historically true, narratively true, biblically true. It doesn't matter. But we do know this, that upon the breaking of the box, when she's anointing his feet, it says she sat down and brake the box. When the box was broken, the ointment is released, as Brother Nee wrote many years ago. So it's painful because we pass through a portal that our emerged self can't get through, and it's a crushing of the bones, and it's almost like a birth in reverse. The way the bones in the skull kind of come down and the shoulders come. I mean, when we're fully alive and adulting, we can't go through those doors. But it's almost like the retreating is a re-wombing, right? It's a occupation of the womb, a place that will be fashioned anew. Sometimes we go kicking and screaming because it was fun to be the emerging self, and we were having too much fun, or because we still had stuff to say to those people that had ticked us off on the way out, because it wasn't them that changed, it was a season that changed. It wasn't them that was wrong, it was we overstayed our grace. Our diligence and our ability to take pain and punishment kept us holding on knuckles, just as long as we could, and now that we're being, everybody that did us wrong, we got more stuff to say, and so we're being pulled in screaming. Or sometimes we go into the cave out of a sense of relief, right? Sometimes we don't want to go because we got a record to set straight, and I don't feel like doing that, and I got to get out there and tell everybody what happened. But the suction of life and the flux is pulling us down, and we got more to say. Or other times we go with a sense of relief. Why? Because we were bitter and we were angry at the world. We were battle weary, and you know what? Fine, screw it. Fine, I'm going to this, and it's painful to go into this cave. It's painful to go into this withdrawal, this retreat, and this cocooning. But you know what? Fine, I didn't want to be part of it anyway, and I don't want to talk to you all anyway, and sometimes when we don't want to go because we got things to say, we're taking every call and placing and trying to say our thing, and don't you see, and this is what was said, and blah blah blah, and trying to prove. And then other times it's like, I don't even want your call, I'm tired of talking about it, I just want to be alone. But how we go in matters not. For whatever our condition upon entering this cave of consecration, entering this season of flux of retreat, withdrawal, and cocoon, we will enter as we are, but we will not remain as we are. For there inside the cave, right, squashed and scraped, nearly feeling like we turned ourselves inside out, raw and vulnerable, the inner parts of us feeling a breeze and sensations that have never felt before, where we're inside through that little portal, watching life, just waiting. Life seems like it passes by. We're just sitting here. Nothing's going on. We find ourselves in this season, as they say, all out of flux to give, right? I don't even care anymore if I never rejoin the chorus of life. But then we become aware of things internal. That we look out at relief, or we look out at anger, and we look out at loneliness, and we look out with FOMO, and we look out with I don't care, we look out with that, and then we sit there long enough for the cave to start to do what it's supposed to do. Things start churning inside, and we wonder, well, maybe there might be something. There might be something for me again, that this is not a place of death forever. This is a place of burial for some sort of resurrection, right? It's the cycle. We start to feel like a first-time pregnant woman, right? That everything, as the 7th month and the 8th month and every movement, in the deepest innards, she's not sure, is it go time or is it simply gas, right? There's something moving, but I'm not sure what it is here. There are false alarms and there are faulted starts, and we're sitting, and we've been in the cave so long that we were bitter at life, or we were relieved, or we were battle weary, and now we start to look out and say, well, maybe one day, I'll join again. And we move along through the cycle, right? And now we come out of this season of retreat and withdrawal, out of this into the next part of rebirth. Or what I like, the old phrase, reissue. You can hear reissue as a vinyl. You can hear reissue as a gold coin, or you can hear the word issue in the way that it's talked about biblically, right? The issue from the body, that we are ourselves, but we are an issue, a reissued, non-warped, stronger and better, right? And of course, this reissue now, this rebirth, it leads us into this season of emergence and rinse and repeat. Well, what is reissue? Something begins stirring in us, and it wants to emerge. And we're fearful because, well, you think, well, man, if I ever get out there again, there's danger out there. I know what I felt. I know what I've lost in times of previous emergence, where I thought this would go on forever, and now I'm concerned that it Might not go forever. And sometimes in the cave, when we feel this thing stirring, this rebirth and reissue, we think that, I'm too scared to go out there again. What if it fails again? Or what if this one collapses? Or I'm too scared to love again. What if this one goes down? Or, well, I was hurt before, and the way I can guarantee that I'll never be hurt is to completely disconnect. But like Schopenhauer, right? I'm like the porcupine. I want to be close to people and get warm, but we spike each other, and then I pull apart. But I don't want to be cold. And I've given up in this time. I don't ever be close to anybody again. But then all of a sudden, it's the warmth of other suns, right? The warmth of other buns, right? You might want to cuddle up and be warm again. And all the fear comes in. But yet we feel ourselves pulling, and we're being pulled towards that little tiny door, the same door that we were sucked in backwards, right? As our carpets and our tarpets, right? We're being pushed towards that thing again. And we think somehow, like a woman, she's like, oh, I want to have a baby. I want to have a baby, until those contractions hit. And she says, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And we think, I'm going to clench my eyes, and I'm going to cross my ankles, and I can somehow will this away, right? I can will away this rebirth. Well, I'll give you a pro tip. You cannot. It's going to happen. We're going to emerge from the cave. And the deal is, this time, though, it's terrible. Why? Because we had to break all those parts and shed all of ourselves to get in. But while we're in the cave, we've grown larger. And now we got to go out that small door. But here's the difference. Going into the cave, coming out of this emergence into retreat, it's we that break down in order to get in. We have to shrink in order to get in. But when we come through rebirth and reissue, it's the cave that needs to break and soften and open to let us out. Exiting the cocoon season, the pain is not the shedding of ourselves, but rather the breaking of the containing walls. Stepping out, humble, but not apologetic for the space that we take up. We, with trepidation, we find ourselves pushing back the very walls that we had relied on to protect us. We were in that thing, and we looked out that little bitty thing, and we looked here, and we were safe in there. And now the walls that we thought protected us, we're pushing them down, because those walls are preventing us, what? From our next season of emergence, for more fully occupying our own space and our own soul. And so we reemerge, and we come out to the brightness of the sun. And it's blinding at first, and it's disorienting at first, because we haven't seen it in a while, and we're not really sure. But we stay there, and all of a sudden then it's warm, and the sun is welcoming. And we're afraid of what people will think or how they're looking at us. But as we open our eyes and we take in a new view, it's different. And we're not entirely sure whether the world has changed, or the people have changed, or that our eyes are brand new. And after a beat, it doesn't matter, because we see a world that we want to embrace, and we want to live in, and we want to fully inhabit. We start working towards emergence, or not working, but flowing towards emergence again. And the way that we know we're new is it's all evidenced by love. There's an inexplicable new yearning within us to wrap our arms around more and more of the world, to wrap our arms around more and more people. If you come out of the cave and you're bitter, if you come out of the cave and you're judgmental, you come out of the cave and you're guard, never again. You came out too soon. You're premature. We're going to have to incubate you, because it's like pulling a pot roast out. We pull it out. The sinew and the muscle didn't break down. It needs more time. Biting into a potato that's not done yet. It needs more time. But when we come out and the process is done, our hearts are enlarged. We seek to gather more rather than scatter, right? We seek to gather rather than scatter. We seek to commiserate and understand the people of the world more than we seek to judge. We find ourselves seeking and seeing beauty far more easily than we see and find fault. And we continue through this season to take more and more territory, to stretch out inward and outward, to be more of ourselves, more true to ourselves. And we continue to do this until the next time of retreat. And no one knows how long each season will last. No one knows in how many different ways they overlap. No one knows what triggers the end of one and the onset of another. We just know that we go through them. and that growing through them is part of life, which is why we ended last week with my closing thought, my advice, my counsel, my directive, my edict, whatever you want to call. Make sure you are living in the middle of all this. Why? Because no matter your season, spring, summer, fall, or winter, no matter where you are in the timeline of humanity, the raging 20s and the romance and the reality, no matter where you are in your focus of life, no matter where you are in real time in these places of flux, the key is that you are alive now, so you must live now. And guess what else? You must love now. Because death comes soon enough for us all. 3,000 tigers left in the wild. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was talking to me about this idea of interplanetary travel, and that on one planet you can be, that 7 minutes on one planet is 20 years on another. Of course, you know that old children's tale from the space station. And he, this idea, this Hebrew idea that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day, that on our planet, in our timeline, it could take 1,000 years, but on another planet, it could be one day. So our lives, our 2.5 hour lives on that timeline could be like, from that place, we walked out and went to the store and came back 2 hours later. How was it? It was 2.5 hours. It was 2.5 hours filled with a spring, summer, winter, and fall, filled with a timeline that everybody's on, humanity with its raging and romance and reality, filled with different focuses in different times of priority, first, second, third, filled with these flux cycles of emergence and retreat and rebirth, reissue, and emergence and retreat, all of that crammed into a 2.5 hour very short lifespan. So no matter where you are in the four seasons, right? No matter where you are in the focus, no matter where you are in the timeline, no matter where you are real time, living and loving now is a conscious decision to be present in your aliveness, even though you cannot control the seasons of life. Reading from the diaries of Esther Hillesum, Eddie Hillesum, as an author, a Dutch author, interned right at the Westbork internment camp there. It's a transit camp. Where she worked on the council, helping people in transit, and then she worked there for several years, and then all of a sudden one day got a notice that you don't work here anymore, you're on the train, and she and her family were bound for Auschwitz, and they found her diary. She had given them to other people and said, if anything happens to me, make sure my diaries get out, and she had kept them and her daily thoughts, and when they put her on the train to Auschwitz, she sat upon her rucksack there thinking, well, maybe there's a chance we'll survive. And they put her mother and her father and her brother, and another brother was somewhere else. They put them all on the train, and they were all headed to Auschwitz. And she sat down and she had a postcard, and she wrote, and she said, I opened the Bible today to a random scripture, and it says, the Lord is my high tower. And I sit here on my rucksack thinking that is true, and not sure what will happen next, not sure where mom and papa and brother are. And she wrote that postcard, and she reached up in the train to Auschwitz, and she pushed it out the window until a Dutch farmer found it years later. And then she was killed in Auschwitz. But her diaries, and I share this with you, and I'm just going to read this excerpt, and we're going to flow it into the chat as best we can, so don't try to capture it all. No, you can feel free to screen capture, to copy and paste, but I'll get it to you. But this is from her diaries, right, working, and she says this, one thing is becoming increasingly clear to me, that God, this is in the middle of this oppression, in the middle of the Holocaust, she says, one thing's becoming clear to me, God, you cannot help us. I love this. One thing's becoming increasingly clear to me. God cannot help us. So what? So she says in her diary that we must instead help. We must help you, God, to help us. I love that. Think of this: being a Jew in that time, being the object of the machinations of warfare and sophisticated genocide, and being in the target of that. And she said, it's occurred to me in the middle of this, God, you can't help us, but we must help you to help us. And that is all that we can manage, she continues, these days. And all that really matters is that in the middle of all this hell, right, no matter what season you're in, I'm saying to you to this TCO, I want you to hear from Eddie here, right, and that all that matters these days, and all that really matters is that we safeguard the little piece of God inside ourselves. And perhaps, maybe, she says, we safeguard that little piece of God in others. That here I am in the Holocaust, here I am in the industrialization of murderous death, part of a farm to gas chamber pipeline that is incredibly efficient. That the conductors of it are watching, toning the dial. How many do we need to kill? How many do we need to keep alive for work? How much time do we have? Our armies win, and we can just dial it up, ramp it up, and ramp it down. She's living in that, and she said, "What I realize is God's not coming to help us. We have to help God help us. We have to spend our daily lives keeping that little part of God inside us alive. And maybe if we can keep that little part of us alive, that little peace and the little love in the middle of all this rage and this hate, maybe we can also, by keeping that part alive, help keep that part alive in others." And she continues in your notes, in the feed, "Alas," she says, "there doesn't seem to be much, God, that you yourself can do about our circumstances. Doesn't seem to be much you can do about these trains and these deaths and these murders and this violence and this rape and all the things that are going on. Can't really do much about our circumstances here, God. It seems you can't really do much about." And then she says, "And God, I don't even hold you responsible for what's going on. Because," in your notes, "God, you cannot help us, but we must help you. We as humans must defend your dwelling place inside us. And we must do it to our dying day." See, this is what I'm talking about today, church. No matter your season, make sure you're living. And part of living is defending and protecting that little part of God that's in us, keeping it alive in us. Because when we keep it alive in us, we keep it alive in others. We keep it alive in the world. She continues, "Something has crystallized." And what has crystallized? She says, "I have looked our destruction in the face. I have looked our miserable end, which has already begun." She says, "I know where I'm going as a Jewish woman. I know where my people, my family are going. I have looked it in the face, that miserable end that has already started taking place in little ways in daily lives. I can see where this is going." She said, "I've looked it straight in the eye. I've looked that destruction straight in the eye, and I've accepted it into my life, that this destruction is coming." She said, "You know, when I accepted the reality for what it is, that death, strategic, targeted, personal, malicious, indifferent, burning death that is coming towards me and mine at rapid pace beyond my control, I looked at it in the eye, and it really didn't diminish my love of life. I'm not bitter," she says. "I'm not rebellious. I'm not even in any way discouraged by watching my timeline shrink. I continue to grow from day to day, right? Inside this horrible thing, I'm still growing from day to day, even when the likelihood of my destruction is staring me in the face. I shall no longer flirt with words," she said. "For words merely evoke misunderstandings. I have come to terms with life. And by coming to terms with life, I mean," it's coming to you in your notes very fast, "I mean this: the reality of death has become a definite part of my life." See, you and I, when we live in happy seasons, the reality of death is out there. It's not kind of part of us until we realize, oh my gosh, it's right there. Listen, it's always right there. In this 2.5-hour window we call life, it's always right there. And listen, the thing about spring, summer, winter, fall, you can be spring or summer, and how often do we see winter show up in me? I'm supposed to have 70, 80 more years till winter, but you know this life is fragile. She says, by coming to terms with life, I mean the reality of death has become a definite part of my life. My life, continuing down in your notes as we bring it to a close, my life, so to speak, has actually been extended by death. Oh, are you listening to me? My life has been extended by death, by my looking death in the eye and accepting it, by accepting destruction as part of life and no longer wasting my energies on fear of death or the refusal to acknowledge its inevitability. I'm not doing that anymore. I've accepted that it's coming, and she says my life got extended in the middle of that. What's she saying? Not the years of my life, not my calendar life, but my living of life. It sounds paradoxical, she says. By excluding death from our life, we cannot really live a full life. And by admitting death into our life, we can enlarge and enrich life. This goes back to the cycle, because this cycle of birth, right? this birthing cycle, and this becoming a full you, and then this death cycle, and then in that death, that rebirthing cycle, that's what she's saying. She's saying by letting that in and saying on the micro, little world, I'll live and die many times in this life, but also in the large macro, I only have one life and one death, and then I'll be rebirthed again outside of this world. But knowing that, accepting that cave that's coming, that in one place it's a metaphorical cave for the burying of my soul in the dark hours of night, but in another place it will be a grave that is not metaphorical, that is real. And by coming to grips with that, it's actually already giving me new rebirth in life, in the life that I now live. She says we have to fight the fears of each tomorrow, right? She was talking about Matthew 6:34. Take no thought for the morrow. She said we have to fight the fears of each tomorrow daily. We have to fight against those many small worries about tomorrow. For those many small worries, she says, they sap our energies. The things that have to be done must be done. And for the rest, we must not allow ourselves to become infested with thousands of petty fears and worries. Now, I'm talking to you, church. We must not allow ourselves to become infested with petty fears and worries. And so all those many motions of no confidence in God. I like that. The fears and the worries and the little things. And what am I going? What season am I in? Am I reborn? Am I this? Do I want to be part of it? Do I not want to be part of it? If it takes away your love, if it takes away your living inside your life, you're not going through it the proper way. So what we've got to do is divorce ourselves daily from the fears of tomorrow. Divorce ourselves from the thousands of petty fears, the thousands of petty worries that sap the energy from us, the thousand expressions of, I don't have confidence in God in that area. Because when we have confidence in God, in every fear, small and large, in every worry, small and large, in every day, dark or bright, when we have confidence in God, now we can get on the business of living in this time of being alive. Ultimately, she concludes, we have but one moral duty. What is that moral duty? We have the moral duty, you and I, living in the raging 20s, spring, summer, winter, or fall, no matter your focus, no matter your online real-time season, we have a moral duty to reclaim large areas of peace in ourselves. We have a duty to reclaim more and more peace in ourselves and to reflect that peace towards others. Think of who's writing these words. Where she was at the time, what type of cave, what type of Apostle Paul, death on every side, pressed in, above strength, and I finally had the response to death. Here's my response. I'm going to trust in God who got me out of this season of retreating and withdrawal into a season of rebirth, into a season of emergence, and got me out of the next season of retreating and withdrawal into that next season. I'm trusting in God. And she says, Hillesum says, we must seek to reclaim the large swaths and areas of peace in ourselves. The daily, I'm going to walk in more and more peace, and to pass that peace, to greet people with that peace to others. And the more the peace that there is in us, the more peace there will be in our troubled world. Why? Because God, we keep looking for you to fix the world, to fix the economy, to fix the politics, to fix the hate. And she says, I don't really think that's a thing. I don't think God is coming to help us. As a matter of fact, I think God is asking us to help God, that we can help preserve the parts of love, the parts of peace within ourselves and within this world. That's what we're really fighting for, to enlarge the peace within us, and maybe by enlarging it within us, to enlarge it in our troubled world. And to that entry of her diary, I say, amen. Closing out this part of our series, we're still in what about your funeral? We've talked about the sin in the soul. We've talked about the striving. We're dealing with seasons. You say to me, Pastor Mike, I don't know how do I know if I can hold on? Well, we close where we began, right? With the psalmist, Dolores. What did she say? She said, oh, my life is changing every day in every possible way. Consider the psalmist. What did Stevie say? Can I sail through the changing ocean tide? She asked us a question. Can I handle the seasons of my life? My answer to you today is yes. Yes, you can. Why? Because there remains a hope in each of us for new life. New life in this world, I will tell you this, you don't have one lifetime in this world, you have many lifetimes. But there's not only a hope for new life in this world as we flux through these seasons within, out the cave, in the cave, emerging from the cave, returning to the cave, the brightness of the sun, the darkness of the shadows. There's not only those lifetimes we will live, which Connie and I, as we've said, we find ourselves in this cave, maybe looking out, maybe daring to think about going out again. We find ourselves rebirth and reissue. Can we ever trust again? Can we ever open ourselves again? Can we ever think that we understand anything again when we see so much that we misunderstood for so long? But we can't let those fears go. Why? Because there's a hope that even in the next emergence, even in the next cave, even in the next reissue, there's hope for second life, for next life. And once we find a place where the long shadows of winter are closing in on us, and we feel like that the chance for another spring has gone, the hope that we have is even in the beyond. The very power and promise, the very promise and power of resurrection. Here we step into caves and we step out of caves and we come into life and we flow out of life and we step into the warmth of this sun. But ultimately there's that hope of a new day, of a new light without the need for the sun. A promise of next life, a promise of continuing life, a promise of re-emerging life, returning life, whatever it is that is so strong that even death itself cannot prevent that light from dawning. That is our hope. And that is the pattern of the entire universe. So what must you do? The same thing I must do. We must find the joy of life, no matter our season. For life itself is a gift, and life in itself, that you are intentionally seeking joy, no matter the season, the bright sunny joys of emergence, the clever amusing joys of the retreat, or the messy joys of the rebirth and reissue. We find the joy. I've given you a quote from a great writer and philosopher. Now I give you a quote from my best buddy, Andre. Death, my buddy said, issues us a never-ending challenge. It tells us, do not waste time. It compels us to say and do what we must, to say and do what we wish. But I implore you, whatever the season, we must not let the trials and pressures of that season squeeze or stifle the simple joy of being alive. Right? We're talking about our funeral. We're talking about that great hope beyond. But we're not going to be in false religion, making everything we know about what happens after you die. Coming back to the seasons of rebirth, the seasons of reemergence, the seasons of retreat. We're coming back to that and saying, right here, right now, I'm living with the hope of resurrection, the joy of life right now. I'm not talking about the great there and then if you're on the right team and you have a chair when the music stops. That's the false life-sucking religion. I'm talking about living right here, right now, protecting God, carving out a place for God inside me and inside others and inside the world, no matter the season that I'm in. And that seems a more useful application of our energy than this constant thing to make sure we're denying the normal parts of being human while faking the pseudo, I wouldn't even say quasi, the false sensation religious projections that come from. We're stripping all that away. To say, in my humanity, I see beauty. In my humanity, I see others' humanity. In my humanity and their humanity, I see the light of God. And sitting in that place, looking in that mirror. God, I'm emerging now. God, I'm retreating now. God, I'm being reborn now. But no matter where it is, whether my soul is feeling warmth or it's cold and dark, I'll protect your love and your peace and your joy inside me. For in protecting it in me, I can project it to others, and in protecting and projecting, we can preserve it in the world. What about your funeral? That's the end of life. The end of the year, the end of this month, the end of the week, the end of the day. Well, here we're at the end of the message. And I want you to go forth with that. I'm going to protect love, joy, and peace. The not yet world is not in meat and drink. It's not in ritual. It's not in rules and regulations which qualify and disqualify. Think of the Christian scriptures. But the truth about the reality of God is this, that it's righteousness, it's peace, it's joy. Righteousness, charitable living, peace, inner and outside, joy, the gift of no matter the season of life, I am alive. Amen. I think we'll stop right there. Okay. I hope you got something today. If what you're hearing from us is enriching your life, then I thank you that we hear from you. Well, I'm sure you hear from a lot of people. No, we want to hear from you. If the message is transforming, if it is uplifting and empowering, then do right to pray for and consider and financially support the messengers. Somebody said, am I going to get a tax write-off for that? There are so many places to give to get a tax write-off. Give it all there. This is not what you're getting a write-off for. This is direct to you what this message means in your heart and home, and direct to us what we mean to you, to your heart and your home, bringing you this message. Well, what about, I need a write-off. I got 50 grand and blah, blah, blah. Listen, there's some places out there you can make a difference. There's some people suffering that you can ease their suffering. You can reduce suffering. You can push back on it. You can prevent it. You can live as an embodiment of love. But I just don't want you going out and giving to say, well, I guess, I'll give a little bit to Pastor Mike and them to support for the teaching, but all the big stuff I'm going to give where I can get a write-off, that's fine. I want you to give all that and more. But beyond that, I want you to be love in the world. I want you to be a carver-outer and a protector and a preserver of God, a little space from God, that no matter what goes on, that space can't be taken from inside you, and it can't be taken from those around you, and it will never be squashed out entirely from our world, because we are the ongoing embodiers of that love of God, just as Christ. That's what it means to be the body of Christ. As Christ was love in human form, we continue as love in human form. So I'm asking you not just to be generous when you give money. Of course, if you're giving money to us, if you're getting something out of it, if you find value, I ask you to communicate value. But out there, I want you to give big. I want you to say, well, I still set aside 10%, and I still set aside this. Do that. Go find, but don't put it in buildings and steeples or whatever. Go find suffering. Well, I want to make sure I'm snatching souls from hell. See, that's what happens. The false religion made everything about when the music stopped, and it never taught us how to dance in the full light of the day. But you go live charitably, not just around the corner, but across the dinner table, riding in the car, neighbor to neighbor, in the grocery line. You everywhere, you embody love. That's what this church is. You're getting the word, the message, it's transforming you. I thank you for what Connie and I are pouring directly into you, that you pour directly to us. But your religious life is so much larger than what takes place in church. You're like Christ, right? What does it say? That God's Spirit was on Jesus of Nazareth, and he went about everywhere he went, doing good and healing and helping all those who were harassed by the powers of darkness. Boy, now that sounds like a religion worth believing in. To me, you had a dear precious member share a TCO message with just a precious friend of hers who was working with her in a salon. And after the message was over, she said, I looked up at him and he was weeping. And she thought, oh man, maybe I offended him. And it was a beautiful time, and it wasn't offended. He was deeply ministered to. And the quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but it just blessed me. She said, I want to pass this along to you because it blessed me. She said, and I may be butchering what he said, but this was the essence of it. I never believed in God because I never heard about one worth believing in. He said, but oh my God, listening to this message, he's talking about a God that I can actually believe in. Whew. That's exactly what's going on here. Before we had to package up and evangelize and take God to the world, we had to first buy into the lie of taking God from the world. We're not bringing God to anybody. We're just talking about and highlighting and speaking about a truth of God that is already known. And I thank you for sharing that journey with us. That's all I got. Listen, make it a great week, supernatural week. Peace, health, protection, preservation, soundness, abundance, aboveness, and joy. I speak it on you and yours. No season is negative. All seasons are beautiful, for you shall live and love, no matter where you are in the cycle. We lift you. We hold you up. May light arise no matter where you are. And lightness, may it arise no matter where you are. You come into agreement with that. Let's believe that together. And I declare it in Jesus' name. Have a great week. Make it a great week. Connie and I, my whole family loves you. And we'll see you back. Hey, we're moving forward. I got a next thing. We're out of season now. I got a beautiful thing to talk to you next week. God bless you. In Jesus' name.